Hi, everyone. Welcome to the May live event for Essential Vegan Desserts. I'm Fran Costigan, the Director of Vegan Baking and Pastry at the Rouxbe Culinary School. And I am the lead instructor for Essential Vegan Desserts, which I had the thrill of putting together, of developing with the wonderful Rouxbe team. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to we're going to be talking about spring desserts. Now, I know one of the things that I like the most about Rouxbe is that our family, our community is all over the world. So it isn't spring for everyone. And I don't tell jokes, but I'm going to attempt a little joke here because I'm in Philadelphia. I moved here from New York a couple of years ago, and I love this city. I am a summer person. I like warm weather. It's like hot weather. I don't like the winter very much at all. So I really look forward to May, but we've had 40s. It's been really cold. I've had my winter coat on. So someone said to me, well, the reason May is called May is because it may be freezing and it may be hot. So that's it. That's as far as I go with jokes. Before I get started on this topic, it's a lot that I want to talk with you about. I've got some information. I want to take your questions. We've got photos to show you, and our wonderful producer, Patrick, who you never get to see, but he's always fixing little things that happen with technology because technology has a little video to show today as well. There is on the right side of your screen, well, it's on the right side of my computer, but it's on the right side. There's a question and answer bar, and all you have to do is type in your question, and I am going to get to as many questions as possible. Sometimes I ask a follow-up question, so feel free. I want to welcome everyone who's here, guests, students of Essential Vegan Desserts, students of other Rouxbe courses, graduates. I especially want to say hello to the students of Essential Vegan Desserts that started just this week. The next course starts in June. We have a way of doing things now that had to do with the lockdown, so that once you register for the next course, you can start at any time. I want to remind people who are in the course that you should look for in the curriculum, in the syllabus, you just go to home, you go to home on your dashboard, there is a place for questions and answers. And if you're doing a particular assignment and you have a question about it, you can write to me. It goes into a queue and I answer it. But you're very likely at this point going to find an answer there already. So definitely take advantage of that. Look at the question and answers and see if you can get some further information. There's also some new information in the course that was added recently. So if you are finished or halfway through or whatever, refresh yourself. I also want to remind students to check the criteria before you send an assignment in, because they aren't all the same. So you want to make sure that you're sending me what I can grade based on the curriculum. So enough about that. Oh, well, actually, there are two more things. That's the question and answer. For matters of a technical nature, you're having a glitch, you can't get something uploaded, write to support@rouxbe.com. And if there's something you want to talk to me about quietly or privately, you can always write to me at fran@rouxbe.com. Anyone who's here today can write to me at fran@rouxbe.com. So it is spring. I was in Bucks County where my kids live over the weekend, and there are a lot of farms in that area. They live near New Hope. And we had actually the first strawberries, the very first. My daughter saw on Instagram that some farm stand that she likes had strawberries. Actually, the strawberries were grown in a greenhouse. So I was a little like, well, the greenhouse strawberries, and they looked so red. When strawberries look so uniformly red to me, I often think they're not going to be good. These were so delicious that we never used them for dessert. We just kept eating them. My first strawberries in Philadelphia haven't happened yet, but my farmer's market sent out an email saying this week. I did get strawberries, and they're quite large. They are organic, and I'm going to talk about that. They don't taste good. They don't taste especially good right now. So I'm going to talk to you. I've done some things to some of these strawberries to make them taste better so that I can use them. And I would love to know what some of your favorite desserts for the spring are as well. But first, I've sent Patrick a couple of photos that I wanted you to see. The first one is a raw cheesecake with a light gel topping that was made with a fruit juice and some really pretty spring summery fruits on them. This was done by a graduate of Essential Vegan Desserts. Learning to use agar, which is vegan gelatin. It's made from sea vegetables. It's something that's been used for millennia in Asia, is really important. So this is a beautiful, beautiful raw cheesecake. Sometimes in the spring and summer, people don't want to turn on their oven. Here is a dessert for you. The next one is from Carolina Malia, who is a renowned chef. She actually, after all of her schooling and working at the Four Seasons and all of her very fine work, she went through Essential Vegan Desserts because she wanted to learn more about vegan desserts. Her bakery in Miami is the award-winning L'Artisan. That's L'Artisane. You want to look that up. She does croissants. She does fruit tarts. She does the most beautiful work, and actually her products can be ordered online. I've gotten them shipped to me. But she did a light gelled fruit soup and fruit salad with a variation on the lace cookie that's in the course. So now this is an example of a dessert that is very fruit forward. The soup is very, very lightly gelled with some agar, about half or a third of the amount that would have been in the first photo, and made from fresh fruit. And then there's more fruit on the dish. Of course, you can zhuzh it up with some cream and so on. And the cookies that are an assignment in the course actually are made with rice syrup and maple syrup. So there's no refined sugar at all. And that's something that I find is wonderful for the spring and going forward for the summer. It's light, it's refreshing, and it's so pretty. It's so pretty. The next dessert is a big piece of baked Alaska, which I had made a few years ago for my son's birthday. He's a grown-up. I should say he's a grown-up. He has 2 children of his own. But ever since he was a little boy, he liked baked Alaska for his birthday. And he happened to be in Philadelphia for a birthday maybe 3 years ago. So I made this dessert. I made it on the gluten-free brownie base because it's gluten-free, which was good for his wife. Oh, thank you. Ellen put the link to L'Artisan, and I appreciate that. It's really worth checking out. But anyway, the brownie is gluten-free, the ice cream is gluten-free, and the meringue is made with aquafaba, which is, most of you, I'm assuming, know, is chickpea liquid. I have a particular way to teach that it's taught in this course. So there hasn't been a single person who followed the recipe who's had a fail. The brownie stays nice and flexible when it's frozen, which is one of the reasons I like to use it. And the last dessert we're going to show you is, I call it an any fruit slump. So for spring, I like to use blueberries and blackberries. Soon I'll be using some stone fruit like peaches and nectarines. I don't love to use strawberries in this because I don't like to cook the heck out of strawberries much. We're going to show you a different way to handle strawberries. And what's wonderful about this dessert is you make the filling, you keep it warm on the stove if you're not ready to proceed. And then it's a 1 bowl soft biscuit dough that gets just spooned onto the warm filling. The pot has to be covered very tightly, and the biscuits actually steam. So there's this like, well, is it a slump? This is an early American dessert, or is it a grunt? In other words, do the biscuits slump into the filling, or do they grunt while they're steaming? And because they need to steam to cook, the liquid that's used, the fruit has a lot more liquid than you would in a cobbler or a crisp. I love this dessert because it's versatile, it's fast, it's relatively low sugar, pretty close to almost no sugar, very close to being a whole foods plant-based. Well, it is a whole food plant-based dessert. It's made with whole wheat pastry flour, and you don't have to turn your oven on. So that's something that's really, really nice. I like it as is when it's warm right out of the pot or saucepan. You need something that's deep. It's delicious and it's saucy and it's fruity, and you get this nice biscuit on the top. If you let it sit for a little while, it becomes more like a buckle. In other words, the fruit, especially if you're using blueberries, because there's so much pectin, kind of makes a more cake-like situation. Oh, Vicky says she's on the website right now. Chef Malia mentions Chef Costigan. That's very generous of her. Before she was where she was, she's a very generous, very special person. So everybody have a look at what she does. Now let's talk about some berries. Some of you may know that the Environmental Working Group, that's EWG.org, does a Dirty Dozen list and a Clean 15 list every year. Strawberries are always at the top of the list. This year, they are number 1. So the Dirty Dozen is fruits and vegetables that they recommend that you eat. You buy organic because they have so much pesticide residue. And the Clean 15 are 15 fruits and vegetables that you can find and feel comfortable eating non-organic versions. Well, this year, strawberries are number 1 on the Dirty Dozen list. Whether you're using, and this is a personal choice. I'm not the food police. I'm just telling you what I know. But when you're bringing berries home, and spring makes me think about berries, the first thing that you want to do is, the first thing you want to do in the store is turn over the package and make sure that none of them look moldy or wet. And then you get them home and you know that you have no moldy or wet berries, but you still need to take them all out of the package and look very carefully. Don't wash them or hull them until just before you're ready to use them, because you don't want them to be wet. So when I'm ready to use the berries that have been picked over, I rinse them. My faucet has a kind of a spray. I rinse them, and then some of you have seen this before. I have a lot of kitchen cloths that are just for fruits and vegetables, and others are for drying, and I keep them separate. but I wash my fruit very gently. I've got raspberries on here too. I've got some really pretty edible flowers that I got from Farmer Lee Jones, the chef garden, for this presentation. And they're dry. Of course, I tasted them. They're very red. They're very plump. I suspected they wouldn't taste very good. And honestly, they don't. So what do? I'm not going to throw them away. I mean, they're not spoiled. They just don't taste like those berries I had last weekend at my daughter's house, are the ones I anticipate tasting at the farmer's market this weekend. So I cut them. I cut them rather small, actually. I sprinkled them with a half a tablespoon. That's about 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. That's all. And I just let them macerate. The natural juices are going to come out, and that should help. I tasted them after about 20 minutes. I think I felt like they still needed a little bit more flavor, and I used a little bit of reduced sweet balsamic, which is something we make in the course, and you'll see it in the video that's going to show. So this can go on a plate with cake. This can be part of a shortcake. I love to make strawberry shortcakes, peach shortcakes, blueberry, blackberry shortcakes using drop biscuits or cornbread. Or I actually made one today using a muffin that I found in my freezer, a really healthy, delicious oat-based muffin. The muffin wasn't very pretty. It looks like what it is. It's brownish, but you'll see what I did to it. So here are the strawberries. And yesterday I roasted some rhubarb, because spring, to me, the harbinger of spring is asparagus and rhubarb. I love rhubarb, and I saw a question from my friend, Chef Kathy Gold. So I'm going to talk about rhubarb. There's a way to do it so you don't have to use a lot of sugar. Absolutely use it. And today I made something up. And what this is a crumble that I can put over berries that are plain or have been macerated or have just a little bit of maple syrup. In my small food processor, I ground up until it was fine like this, equal parts of rolled oats that had been previously toasted and cooled, and some pecans, because that's what I had, some cinnamon, and I put them in a saucepan. I used a little bit of vegan butter and then a little bit of maple syrup. You don't have to use the fat if you don't want to. The maple syrup will do it. And I have a kind of a gluten-free crumble to put over the fruit desserts if I want to. In the course, we have a baked crumble, or a crumble that's the ingredients. Let's see. It's whole wheat pastry flour, and there's probably some oat in there, and it's more involved. You can sprinkle it over your crisp or crumble. To me, it's one and the same thing pretty much, and bake it. Or to save time, or if you like a crisper crisp, you can pre-bake it. So I often have pre-baked, I'm going to try to say this without stumbling, pre-baked crisp in my freezer that I can pull out and use. I always have some pastry cream, and I'm going to get that out of the refrigerator. I made 2 different kinds today. They're both cashew based, and that would be something to use with these desserts. Some cream on top of your berries or next to your cake. I like serving a smaller piece of smaller piece of absolutely delicious. It has to be delicious. Who wants to eat something that's healthy and vegan if it isn't delicious? But fill out the plate with fruit, and then you have a go, and you can have some cream on the plate as well. I've got a piece of chocolate cake that I glazed with ganache that I'll probably put a scoop of Oatly ice cream, because I've got some in my freezer. So I'm going to ask Patrick now to show the video What this is it's a way to take berries, strawberries that don't taste very good, and we roast them in a sweet balsamic reduction. I make extra of that reduction and keep it around because it's so delicious. And you can roast other fruits as well. So I think I'm going to have Patrick show you the video now.
Roasted strawberries add depth to many desserts, from simple fruit salads to strawberry shortcakes. To make roasted strawberries, add the maple syrup and reduce sweet balsamic to the strawberries and gently stir to evenly combine the ingredients. Next, pour the strawberries into a shallow dish, along with any remaining liquid, and spread them out to form a single layer. Transfer the strawberries to a preheated 375 degrees oven and let roast for approximately 15 minutes, or just until the strawberries begin to soften. Next, strain the strawberries through a fine mesh sieve. If there is more than a couple tablespoons of liquid remaining, reduce the liquid over high heat for a minute or two. Just before serving the strawberries, finish with some framboise liqueur if desired and the reduced strawberry balsamic liquid. Gently stir to combine the ingredients. Roasted strawberries can be served as is, or they can be used as a sauce with cakes or other desserts. Here we are using them to make these delicious strawberry shortcakes.
Okay, so those are the roasted strawberries, which are absolutely delicious. Now, there is no exact time for the berries. It depends how firm or soft they are. If you're able to get the little strawberries that are bred just to go from field to your mouth and aren't bred for shipping, I wouldn't roast those, but it's a really terrific technique. So what I want to show you some of the things I've done here. So now in this bowl, I have the strawberries that were macerated. There's some liquid here. I put a mint leaf for no special reason. Well, because I had it. And now I'm going to put some of that crumb on here. I know what I'm having for dessert tonight, and I can have a dessert. Now here's some crumble. And I'm just going to put this down and show you some of the creams I made. One of our favorite recipes in the course is a vanilla pastry cream. It's super versatile. Today, I made 3 different kinds. I did a cashew cream with oat milk, actually, instead of coconut milk. I just wanted to see. Now, I had a very interesting thing happen, and I was really glad it happened because I can give you some information. But let me get some of this cream on the crumble. All right, there's a nice healthy portion. And just because I have them, I'm going to tuck a pretty flower there. So here's quite a healthy spring dessert that you can eat with your eyes, I think, and feel good about. This is, I have to put this down so it doesn't fall. This is what I would call a shortcake. Now, generally, I make this, as I said, with the drop biscuits. But because I had these oat banana muffins in my freezer, I decided to see what would happen. So I had cut the muffin in half. Just these muffins. I cut them in half. I put some of the pastry cream on the bottom. You can see that it's blue. Why is it blue? Because I wanted to represent blueberries and I didn't have any. but I have this natural blue butterfly pea powder from Suncor Foods that's really fun. All their colors are really fun and they're natural. So I mixed it into the cream, and then I took some of the raspberries, and on the plate I have a few microgreens because I think we don't always have to have just flowers or mint. I think the microgreens are really nice as well. And over at the front of the plate, I have some strawberry sauce that I made recently. The last time I bought strawberries a few weeks ago, that didn't taste so good. So I macerated them and then I blended them. I had it in the freezer. I took it out. This will be really nice too. And I took a little bit of that cream. Let's see if I can get this out of here without a spoon. I can't, so I won't. But I can show you. I took the same cream and I added a little bit of freeze-dried strawberry powder to the mix, but I did it at the end. I don't know about you, but when I've done a thick cream or a nut, this particular pastry cream or a nut cream in my Vitamix, I can't get every bit out, and I don't like waste at all. So what I do is I take, depending on how much, kind of eyeball how much of the food is left in the bottom of the Vitamix, or the bottom and the sides, I add a little bit, usually of plant milk or water, depending, and I turn the machine on. And if I've made pastry cream, I have this delicious sweet cashew milk, or I have a thinner nut butter or something like that. So while I was doing that, I actually got this strawberry cream, which I know I'm going to enjoy. And this is the pastry cream made as is. And you can see that it's really thick. When I pour that out into a tart, it can be cut. Now, this cream generally looks very close to white. Most of these vegan creams and frostings aren't pure white because there is a little bit of molasses retained in the vegan sugar cane. But this was really much darker than usual, and I was trying to reverse engineer and figure it out, and I know for sure this is what happened. So I soak cashews ahead, and then I soak them. If I'm not ready to use them, I drain them really well, put them in a container and put them in my freezer, and I mark this many grams or ounces of soaked cashews. I defrost them and I use them. If I'm in a hurry and I don't have any soaked cashews in my freezer, and that's rare because I like to think ahead, I try to do a mise en place kind of head, then I will pour boiling water over the nuts and let them soak for about 40 minutes. Today, what I did was I cooked the cashews in boiling water much longer than I usually do. And I know for sure that's why they turn brown. So I don't recommend that. You can pour them into a bowl and, of boiling water, but I don't recommend cooking them. That's what I want to say. I just want to see. Here are other things that you can use to make a parfait with fruit. These are chocolate cake crumbs that were from some leftover chocolate cake. It's pretty rare, but it happens. Or maybe you do a test of a cake. You try a recipe, you didn't like it so much. It's not horrible, but it's not something you want to serve. Crumble the cake or make fine crumbs in a food processor, and then I get them. These are crispy. I would probably add some cocoa nibs to these to replace the crumble or the crisp topping that I made. If someone can't eat nuts, then cacao nibs are a great substitute. They taste a little bit actually like walnuts. And this, many people think this is super fussy, but I stuffed a raspberry with ganache. And I tell you, one or two of these on a platter or a whole platter, I once did a whole platter, are pretty remarkable for people who don't want to eat dessert but want to have a bite of fruit. A little bit of chocolate ganache in here is a way to go for sure. So I just want to answer some questions. I've been chatting for a long time. Catherine wants to know, which is best to use, fresh fruit or frozen fruit for a dessert? That's a good question, Catherine. There's nothing wrong with using frozen fruit at all. I keep frozen fruit in my freezer. I like to have blueberries on my morning oatmeal, and I use frozen ones in the wintertime. What I have discovered is it's best not to defrost the fruit before you fold it into a batter-based dessert. That will keep some of the bleed away. So the best fruit to use is the one that has the best flavor and is the freshest and that you can get. Let's see. Oh, yes. So Kathy agrees. Love those frozen. I mean, frozen fruits and vegetables are actually quite nutritive. Let's see. Laura says, when it comes to baking, why is it that some recipes call for baking powder and others for baking soda? Do they play different roles, or does it depend? Well, Laura, it depends. They're both what's called chemical leaveners, and baking powder contains baking soda. So particularly with vegan desserts, it's really nice to have both of the leaveners because that's what's helping to get the cakes rising. But it does matter. For example, many particularly old-fashioned chocolate cakes, there's this accidentally vegan chocolate cake that everybody has been using. It's a depression cake is one of the names. It's also called wacky cake, eggless cake. I saw last week that King Arthur, I think King Arthur Baking Company is having an anniversary of some kind, and they listed this chocolate cake as their first and best cake. And I looked at it and I said, oh, that's the depression cake. So that cake was developed at a time when people couldn't get milk and, well, they couldn't get eggs. And it uses non-alkalized cocoa powder. That calls for baking soda, not baking powder. A recipe should tell you which to use. But if you've got a chocolate cake recipe and it just says cocoa powder, it doesn't say Dutch or natural or alkalized or non-alkalized, look at the leavening, and if the leavening is baking powder and baking soda, use Dutch process. If it's just baking soda, use the natural cocoa powder, the non-alkalized. And just make sure that your leaveners are fresh. They don't last forever. So that's it. So here Lisa is asking a similar question. When is it best to use baking powder over soda? Pretty much never. My batter-based desserts almost always use both, and I use double-acting aluminum-free baking powder. We need that lift that we might get and structure that we might get from eggs. So you want to use both. The fact is that really the simplest answer and the most truthful is find a recipe that is correct. Don't just go out into the interwebs and pick up a recipe from someone you don't know and there are no reviews. Today we have so many really reliable recipes for vegan desserts beyond this course. Of course, the ones in the course are my favorite because they really work. Will you provide your recipes for these desserts, or should I be taking notes? Well, notes are always good, Elizabeth. People who are Rouxbe students can go back and watch the video again. But if you send a note to me, fran@rouxbe.com, I can give you some of the recipes. Actually, Rouxbe has allowed me to put some of them on my website. That's francostigan.com. So you can search for the pastry cream and you can search for the biscuits for sure. And speaking of pastry cream, Donna has a question. Any suggestions for making a vegan pastry cream that's thick enough to be piped? Well, this one is definitely thick enough to be piped. And one of my recent graduates, Marie Jose, who was already a cake decorator had been a cake decorator and pastry chef for about 7 years before she came into the course, really liked this particular pastry cream. And recently in her new job, she showed a photo of tarts with it piped. So it's a matter of getting the cream thick enough. I do that by using, generally speaking, agar, which is a gelling agent. Think of it instead of gelatin, bovine gelatin, and a starch. So a recipe in the course for a whipped topping that pipes is like making a gel. It uses agar and it uses, I'm pretty sure, I don't have it in my head, but a starch slurry. And then it's poured out. We always do a test to make sure we don't have to add more agar to the mixture so that you get the consistency that you want. But you allow it to firm up and then cream it in the food processor, and then it can pipe. So that's the answer. Laura wants to know, what are the healthiest and best sweeteners that you use in baking? Brown sugar is definitely not healthier than cane sugar. Brown sugar is typically cane sugar that's been sprayed with the molasses that's been taken out. So we have an entire unit on granulated sweeteners and liquid sweeteners in this course because it's such a big topic. I use all of the real sweeteners. So instead of using brown sugar, I use coconut sugar, which is considered to be a really nice, sustainable sugar. I think it has it's got a nice caramel taste. I grind it because coconut sugar tends to be coarse. Or you can use something that's called whole cane sugar. If you're in the United States, you've probably seen Wholesome Sweeteners. Sucanat, that's just an acronym for sugarcane natural. So that's the entire cane with all of the molasses intact. That really does taste like brown sugar. So I wouldn't say any, my thing is desserts, right? But I don't call any sweeteners nutrient dense. There are some that are better for you than others. For the liquid, I like maple syrup. I like rice syrup. I like date syrup very much. I don't use much molasses unless you're buying organic molasses. It's all the chemicals that are used to refine sugar are in the molasses, but I like that very much. Rhubarb. My friend Kathy wants to know about rhubarb. I want to love it, but most recipes have so much sugar to offset the tartness or have it paired with strawberries. The last time I used it was only as a beautiful syrup with your pavlova. Oh, that's nice, Kathy. Well, I'll tell you what I did with this. So I love rhubarb too, and I happen to like tart things, but rhubarb is really tart. And by the way, make sure that your children and your pets don't get near the leaves of the rhubarb. They're really dangerous. There is a tremendous amount of oxalic acid, I think, and they can be deadly. You'd probably have to eat a lot, but don't eat any. What I did with this, Kathy, is I trimmed the rhubarb. I cut them into rather long pieces because I didn't want this to get mushy. I do have something. So what I did with some of the trimmings was I thought I would make a syrup, but I didn't get to the syrup. I actually cooked the trimmings in water with just a little bit of sugar. I just kept tasting until I tasted it a little, and then I pureed it. Here, I poached this. I actually roasted this rhubarb in a baking dish with a mixture of my vegan orange honey and that is made with rice syrup, maple syrup, and a little bit of agave and some orange. I used some lemon too, and water. And it actually was delicious. It's sweet, but it's not that cloying sweet. I don't love it paired with strawberries. I know, I agree with you. Strawberry rhubarb pie, crisp and so on. I like my strawberries. I like my rhubarb, and that's what I do. So try cooking, poaching, or roasting your rhubarb not with sugar, but there's orange juice. That's what it was. It was orange juice and rice syrup and maple syrup, and it worked really great. Thank you for that question and for liking rhubarb. Teresa wants to know, what are some good dessert recipes that are quick, not too many ingredients, can be made ahead of time other than mousse? Well, Teresa, yes, we want quick recipes. Okay, well, the strawberry dish that I showed you would be an example. All I did was cut up strawberries and let them macerate. The cream can be made ahead and stored in your freezer, defrost and go. Make some cakes, muffins ahead, put them in your freezer. The gelled soups take absolutely no time at all, so that's just not a problem. If you have a stash of frozen bananas in your freezer, which I do, I buy bananas and then I forget to eat them, make yourself some nice cream. Just cut up the bananas, put them in a food processor, and then I add in chocolate or dates, Majol dates, pitted. They don't get really hard, so it tastes like pieces of caramel, and you can just you can have a ball with that. So there are lots of desserts that you can do fast and ahead. Ellen says, can you share tips to help me get over fear of agar? Ellen has a fear of agar. Well, actually, Ellen, a lot of people do. And I know this by the comments I get in the course. And I know this from having taught in classrooms for so many years, where people said, I just cannot get the agar dissolved. Well, you can if you follow my rules. So agar comes in 3 forms. It comes as a bar. That's hardly ever seen anymore. But if you come across it, you get it wet and you shred it into your fruit juice. I made so many what were called cantons when I was pastry chef at Angelica Kitchen, because that was on the menu every single day. So I got very familiar with agar. And then agar flakes, which are very easily found, have to hydrate in the same way that you would bloom gelatin. And how do you do that? You just, whatever liquid you're starting with, and I'm going to go back and tell you what to do if it's a thick liquid. You just sprinkle the amount of agar flakes over the top, and don't turn the heat on. You want room temperature or chilled liquid, and just let them hydrate. They can, for 10 minutes or so. I mean, it can stay that way for overnight. You're not going to get a gelled result because agar needs heat. It needs to come to a boil and simmer in order to activate the gelling activity. If you're using agar powder, a lot of people say just put it in and go. I let that hydrate as well, but not for as long. Now, they are not the same. You can powder your agar flakes, but you're not going to have agar powder. The strengths are different. Agar powder is 3 to 5 times as strong as flakes. So that's what you do to get started. If you're starting with coconut cream or a cashew cream or something that's thick, you don't want to try to hydrate your agar in that thick liquid. I take a little bit of the liquid measurement out, make it water, and let the agar hydrate that way. One of the beauties of using agar is that, unlike bovine gelatin, let's say you did it right, you don't have any flakes, it looks beautiful. But you don't know that yet. You take a little bit after it's come to the boil and simmered, take a little bit. I mean, I have a bazillion of these. Put a little bit of your agar mixture in your fridge for 5 minutes or so. And then you decide if it's firmer than you want it to be, you add a little bit more liquid. If it's not as gelled as you want it to be, you start all over again. You don't dump out what you had. You just put a little bit of agar powder over the top and you get going. So Ellen, I hope that helped you. Marina says, I made the Rouxbe cheesecake, but the crust didn't hold together at all. Add a little coconut oil. That's a good fix. That's a great thing. That's a great question or a great comment. When you're doing crusts, particularly raw crusts, and if the recipe says X grams of coconut oil or coconut butter or maple syrup or whatever, you need to squeeze some in your hand to make sure that it will really hold together before you go pressing. So that is absolutely the thing to do. Add a little bit more coconut oil, can add a little bit more liquid, and that should definitely work. Mary, hi Mary, how are you? It's good to see you. Mary lives in paradise. She's got all these beautiful fruits and vegetables growing, and always makes me jealous. Mary says, I wanted to thank you for a fabulous curriculum and program. Thank you you did such beautiful work. I often get the question of how to make gluten-free phyllo dough. Oh my gosh, Mary, I haven't seen gluten-free phyllo dough myself, but that doesn't mean it's not out there, particularly with this big interest in gluten-free today. So keep your eye out, do a search. I don't know. When I was a pastry chef at Angelica Kitchen, I don't remember the name of the bakery now. Poseidon was in Hell's Kitchen, and they were the place. They made their own phyllo dough. And it's a family-owned company. And I went to watch one day. I mean, phyllo is paper thin. I'm watching them make it. And they did a whole wheat version for us. But I'm sorry, I haven't seen the pre-made version. Catherine wants to know, how do you make the pastry cream? It's soaked cashews, it's coconut milk, it's sweetener, and then you can and vanilla. And then you can just stop if you want a pouring cream. If you want a thicker cream for a tart, you add some agar and guar gum, and you run the high-speed blender until it actually comes to a boil. Catherine, you can, if you're not in the course, you can find that recipe, I think, at francostigan.com. Elizabeth has a really important question for all to talk about. And she's asking, am I not worried about the arsenic in rice syrup? So if anybody here isn't aware of that, a couple of years ago, there was a study from Tufts University, and they were looking at the ingredients in energy bars or snack bars that were primarily marketed to children, and rice syrup was considered one of the more benign sweeteners. And I don't know how they did their tests, but there was this uproar about how much arsenic was in the rice. And that really, so Patrick has a really good link here for us. Thank you, Patrick. So what I did was, the first thing I thought was, when I changed my diet 25 years ago, I really was following a macrobiotic diet. I didn't know any vegans at the time, so I was eating a lot of brown rice. And I still like brown rice very much. But I did some research, and it seems that organic brown rice really had a very high level of arsenic, and there was no allowable limit for arsenic in food. Well, rice is grown in water, and because it's become a popular health food, the brown rice in particular, it was being grown in the United States and some other countries too, particularly in the United States where cotton was grown previously. The chemicals that were used in the growing of cotton haven't been allowed for years. They've been pulled, but they're still in the groundwater. So what I do is twofold. I buy rice syrup from California, You can also Google brands of rice syrup. For a while, you couldn't find it. It's around again. It's very particular, and it does some wonderful things that no other sweetener does. So I buy mine from California, and when I cook brown rice, I rinse it, I soak it overnight in abundant water, I throw that off, I rinse it again, and then I cook it like pasta instead of cooking it the way I was taught to cook brown rice. So that's what I should do. So everybody, you can copy this link that Patrick put in about the brown rice. Terry says, love your simplicity and calm approach to baking. You have wonderful tips. Thank you, Terry. That makes me really, really happy. I tried it. You know, I wouldn't characterize myself, or some of the people who know me wouldn't characterize myself as always, I mean, who's always calm? But for me, baking, making desserts, making people happy, figuring things out, it's really my meditation. So everything from shopping for ingredients to getting my mise en place together makes me feel so happy. And I really appreciate that, Terry. Thank you. Catherine says, New Hope is one of my favorite places to be. It is. It's really, really wonderful. It is, for sure. And Sprig and Vine in New Hope is a wonderful vegan restaurant. So where to eat vegan in Philly and nearby? Oh my gosh. Kathy, yes. Philadelphia is a very vegan restaurant loaded place. So why don't you send an email to me, Catherine, Fran@Rouxbe.com, and I'll send you a whole list. But there's Soy Cafe. There's Veg. I live 5 minutes from Veg. There's yesterday, Kathy and I and other friends from Les Dames d'Escoffier had our first meal together, an outside-inside meal, if you know what I mean. We were sitting in one of those kind of cabins, but it was open, and we were at Bar Bonbon, which is a wonderful restaurant. It's completely vegan. So Catherine says, on the topic of agar, talked about flakes, powder, and bars. Well, the agar strips that look like noodles, the agar strips that look like noodles, I haven't seen. If you mean the noodles that you cook and eat, that's kelp, not agar, but the ones I'm talking about were actual bars. The ratio of agar, powder, I don't know the strips, so I can't help you out, Catherine. If you have a link to one, you can put it in here. But the ratio of flakes to powder is, you have to do a test, but it's about, the powder is 3 to 5 times as strong as the flakes. Hannah says, it's great to see you again. Have you found vegan phyllo dough? Yeah, most phyllo dough is vegan. It's flour and water, pretty much. The way I make my phyllo, I haven't made baklava in a long time, but looking at some of the recipes I'm seeing, I'm getting ready. So I make vegan baklava. I use oil and some nuts in between every 2 pieces of the phyllo, not every one, and it's really great. I'm thinking of my friend Charlene. SCHAR makes gluten-free frozen phyllo dough, yellow logo. Thank you, Terry Lynn. Okay. Now, Larry says, I'm a beginner, most things in the kitchen. Just tried an interesting recipe for scones. It consisted of almond and oat flour, vanilla extract, maple syrup, and dried fruit. Once baked, 70 to 80% of the center was doughy. You bet I have thoughts. That's a terrible recipe. There's nothing to hold it together. Okay. You can't just use almond flour and oat flour. There's no baking powder in there. When you're using gluten-free flours, you have to have something to hold it together. Like you need some xanthan or guar gum. So Larry, I would suggest you find a reliable recipe. That's not it. Chocolate, more chocolate. Any fun, quick recipes that taste amazing, says Vicky. Well, I'm for chocolate. I wrote a book called Vegan Chocolate. I make chocolate mousse. chocolate ganache, which is just a measured amount of a particular percentage of chocolate and some plant milk, and can be flavored with all kinds of spices and herbs and things. I like plain old chocolate pudding. Give me chocolate pudding any day. I love chocolate pudding. I mean, like the kind my mother used to make from a box. Mine is as quick, and it's really, really delicious. In the course, we have a chocolate mousse that we call Break the Rules chocolate mousse, because if you know anything about chocolate, you know that you want to keep chocolate and water or chocolate and steam away from each other. And this is chocolate and water that's mixed over an ice bath. Elizabeth wants to know, can I use Trader Joe's balsamic for reducing? No, you don't have to buy a really expensive one. When we were doing the videos for the course originally, we actually did a side-by-side comparison. We made the reduction using an ordinary supermarket brand of balsamic and a more expensive doesn't always mean great, but a better quality. And we did notice a little difference, but you can use a supermarket brand for reducing. You want to have your fan on or your windows open, because as it reduces, there are some fumes. Laura says, I roasted Michigan cherries. Oh, you have me at Michigan cherries in the balsamic reduction, and they were fabulous with shortcake and your vanilla pastry cream. You can't touch the magic there. Well, I can believe you created it, Laura. You're doing absolutely beautiful work. And when cherry season comes, I eat an embarrassing amount of cherries. Right now I have some sour ones in the freezer that I fold into nice cream, but I can't wait for cherry season. Kathy's going to try the mandarins roasted. Let me know how that goes. I want to show you guys something. So I'm going to hold everything up. So you saw the shortcake. This is this is a piece of chocolate cake that I glazed with the ganache that I just brought over here. And I put some chocolate on the plate. And I would eat this and I'm eating this, and that's why my hands aren't in gloves right now. But some of this rhubarb on the side, because I think that would be a foil. My desserts taste like dessert, but they're not super, super sweet, because I don't like super, super sweet. Some of you have probably heard me tell the story of my first job in a restaurant where I took out pretty much all the sugar out of the desserts. I was a little bit food policey at the time, and my boss said, Costigan, you're making brownies, not brown bread. Put some of the sugar back in. So here is, let's see, what have we got? I'm going to take this flour and use it on the plate. And I just drizzled some of the syrup that I got from roasting the rhubarb. One of the things that I think is really effective that I learned at Rancho La Puerta when I was their visiting guest chef. And I'm so happy that I'm going to be going back in July. But they have an organic garden that is just amazing. And we pick fruits and vegetables from that garden before we start class. But instead of using the whole flour, they showed me, they just use petals. And I think it really is more effective most of the time. So this piece of cake is going to go to my neighbor and the crisp will be for me. I think I'll probably have this too. And here, when I have a pansy, then I will use the whole flour. But this is a really nice plate. I like it this way. I don't need any cream. Could have a nice scoop of ice cream over here. And that's for me, this is dessert. And since we were talking about strawberries and rhubarb going together, let's see, I'm just going to duck for a minute. But that's the way I would do it. I would use them fresh on the plate, fresh on the plate. So does anybody have any further questions before we say goodbye? And I definitely would like to hear from you. Tell me what topics you would like going forward. But here is one of my favorite spring desserts. Chocolate for me is year round, so it doesn't go away in the spring. I've got roasted rhubarb and I've got macerated strawberries and some raspberries. And then I have my shortcake, my shortcut shortcake, because it was made with a muffin, not with a biscuit. Try making a shortcake sometime with cornbread. It's delicious. And here I could really have this for breakfast. It's fruit and cream and oats and nuts and a little maple syrup. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much for coming. If you have any further questions, just reach out to me, fran@rouxbe.com. And everyone be safe, be happy, stay well. Thank you for coming today.